Hi everyone. Today we have Abhishek Singh, Chief Analytics Officer of Lending Cart. So welcome Abhishek. How are you doing?
Thank you, Sunil. Doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah. So I'll jump straight to the questions. So the first question I wanted to ask, actually, the online money space, the online lending space, there has been a lot of changes. So before we delve into that, can you just tell us something about the technology Lending Guard is into? Because, you deal with data, and today data is big, big data. And you need a lot of analytics tool, you need, data tools, and there's use of AI. So it would help before we can go forward if you can tell about the technology, related to data and other things that Lending Cart is dealing with.
So Lending Cart, has always been a digital-led fintech. So what we had done was we were one of the first firms in India, who were evaluating customers basis a completely credit-driven model. So we had created a machine learning algorithm in Python, and that continues to, be modified and upgraded. So the entire decisioning was completely automated right from the get-go, and it was completely based on Python. So we had looked at multiple parameters, and we were also the first company to not just look at application and credit bureau data, but we had started looking at bank statements as a very important source of information, especially for MSMEs, right, wherein there is a lot of transaction in their current accounts, etc. So we created an entire algorithm which used to look at application data, credit bureau data, and bank statement data, and created multiple risk profiles and credit profiles of the customers, and accordingly then created what kind of exposure we wanted to take on them. So it has been a tech-led and a data-led company from the get-go. And over and above that, we have used cloud hosting platforms to make sure that we always had scalability available to us. So the entire models and everything was loaded into the cloud, and even our data warehouse and all kinds of reporting algorithms are all present in the cloud from the get-go. So we've been a very heavy user of data. From an analytics standpoint, it's Python, it's all kinds of machine learning algorithm tricks like whether it be random forest, whether it be extreme gradient boosting methods, etc. So we have always been on the cutting edge from an analytics perspective, and that's what's created the entire brand and the entire portfolio.
So, and also probably I would have jumped straight into COVID, but I think the fintech space has seen a lot of disruption in the 2010s itself. First thing is people are using their mobile for online money. Your mobile is now your identifying card. You can, do all your transactions with mobile. Then we had one disruption like demonetization. That also was such a big thing, and that also led to more online money being used and more action happening online. So before we jump into COVID, maybe if you can tell us that all the disruptions that happened in the 2010s, the industry, and also what your company did. Yeah.
Sure. So I think mobile obviously has been a game changer from a lending perspective. What has started happening is the traditional way of trying to understand where the customer works, where the customer's home, etc. was all dependent on field verification. People used to send their agents out there. They used to verify, how your business was and whether you were staying where you were, wherever you have claimed. And I think a lot of that has changed with respect to, GPS positions of the phones being included in terms of verifications. So, you know where a customer typically spends time during the day. You have number of hours that the phone is at a particular place. Those kinds of things started coming in with phones. The other thing which started coming in with phones was, all the application development started happening, and therefore each lender started creating their own applications. Those applications started getting access to all kinds of phone data records, right? So you had access to saying, whether it's a prepaid, postpaid, how many postpaid charges have been done, the SMS data being available. So all kinds of debits and credits happening in your account were typically started getting monitored. Now, initially, it was a little bit of a wild west because people did not really understand the difference between, private and public information, and everybody was scooping up whatever data you could, because the whole premise was, data is the king, and therefore the more you know about the customer, the better you'll be able to underwrite the customer. But I think over a period of time, it has become much more prudent, and therefore prudential lending norms have come in terms of what data you need to access and what should you access. So I think all of those constraints have been put in place, and that's become a good framework now. That was one big disruption, and everybody was started to create software development kits into their applications and scooping up the data. All of that started happening. I think demonetization was a big one, wherein while a whole lot of digitization was always available in the acquisition space, and that's when customers are actively looking out, so their phone is switched on and they give you whatever data is required. I think payment and collections was always something which lagged behind from a technology integration perspective. So demonetization, I mean, you could keep on paying cash till demonetization. The moment that money became worthless, I think cash collections took a big hit, and therefore the world moved to more digital payment platforms like QR codes or net banking or mobile banking, or payment gateways like Razorpay, etc. started to come into picture, and everybody started using those platforms instead of cash collections. Lending card, we started in 2014. Mobile was already big. We started using a lot of data and analytics and mobile-based data. But I think from the get-go, we were very clear we did not want to engage in cash collections. So therefore, demonetization for us did not make that much of an impact from a collections perspective, primarily because we were always in digital payments. But what we did was, there were various industries which were getting classified differently depending on the amount of cash people used to carry in those industries. So I think that classification, the usage of that cash in terms of underwriting started going down quite a bit, and therefore the way you started looking at customers in their industries started changing quite a bit on the demonetization. I think that was a very large parameter, especially on the MSME segment, which we deal with. So, even when I was working with McKinsey, we were looking at Southeast Asia, and when we were looking at underwriting MSMEs, there were two kinds of parameters that people used to look at, quantitative and qualitative. So qualitative was more about understanding how long the partners have been in the business, how is the business doing, ITRs and so on. But there was also a qualitative part to it, which A, looked at the financials, B, also looked at how much cash an industry used to carry. And that was big in Southeast Asia. I think all of that has gone for a complete toss, because some of those models were then imported into the country, and they went for a complete toss the moment Demon came. So I think, two large changes, and thankfully we were always on the digital space, so demonetization did not happen.
So that was the 2010s. So there was one global disruption, mobiles, and local disruption, which was demonetization. But right now we're living in a world where the disruption is across all industries, all sectors. There's not a single thing. I mean, probably we are going to see a greater shift since World War II in the way we, lifestyle, technology and all. So, I mean, how would you see your company and the fintech space? One, I would say is during the COVID lockdown, a lot of changes have happened, and there are also a lot of long-term things that are happening. So I'd just like to know what you're doing in the lockdown and, this pandemic phase, and in post-COVID world, it's going to be different. So if you can speak something on that.
I think, look, fundamentally, when you have looked at lenders have always assessed borrowers on two large, lenses. One is the ability to pay, and the second is the intent to pay. I think what's happened with the entire COVID, lockdown, etc., is now there is a third lens in the frame, which is the habit to pay, right? 2 moratoriums later and 6 months down the line, borrowers, we don't even know if they remember that they have an EMI payment to make. And there are already whispers and talks saying that there might be an extension of the moratoriums in the coming time. So I think what we have tried to do is to educate the borrowers about the cost of taking a moratorium, right? Because you're still ending up accumulating that interest and then paying interest on interest at a later point. So we have educated them on the cost of taking a moratorium. 2, we have also incentivized borrowers to make payments during this time. And there are various methodologies through which various lenders have tried. We have tried, giving prepayment options, giving settlement options through Sahyog schemes and so on. So there is a whole lot of analysis and deep dive that we have done in borrower behavior to ensure that people don't forget the payment of EMIs. That is one. I think the other part is, and in this time you've also realized that people were so used to getting to office, sitting on their desk. There was a telecalling activity which used to happen to remind customers of their payments. Once telecalling did not work and people bounced or went into delinquent buckets, there were field agents who used to visit these customers, educate them, try to get them to make payments, etc. That entire model has gone for a complete toss, right? So I think the technology adoption, which was anyway supposed to happen over a period of time, has just been expedited 20x, right? So all of a sudden, there are companies who have created solutions which allows users to pick up their mobile phones, connect to a PBX, an old time, thought process, but be able to make a call to the customer and still use the entire office network instead of using the home networks, right? As you can see, the internet service providers, they are making moolah right now because everybody is working from home. Yeah. So, everybody is trying to make sure they're on Zoom meetings and Hangout meetings and whatnot. Collections, the other part that has changed is, there was a lot of emphasis on field collections on the slightly harder buckets. That entire piece is again changing, right? And therefore, it's now more analytically driven. You're trying to understand, even though customers flow into similar buckets, their behavior may not be similar. So therefore, who are the customers whom you can nudge a little, push a little only through telecalling and make them flow back. The rest you have to continuously educate, make them understand, what's happening in their bureau scores, what's happened in the post-COVID world as they will need more loans, how they will be seen if they don't make these payments now, right? So I think a lot of emphasis has been on collections in the COVID times. As we see the market opening up, and it started happening now, and a small little amount of disbursal is happening, I think there are three kinds of industries which typically have come into focus. There were essential industries like petrol bunks and pharma, right, and groceries and whatnot, which haven't seen too much of an impact of COVID. Then there are industries which have a slightly longer term impact, like automobiles, like industrial supplies, which will go on for a bit. And then there are industries which have had a carnage, right? There are industries like hospitality, travel and tourism, jewelry, etc. So I think the way we will start looking at industries, starting to take exposures in those, will typically change, and therefore the existing credit models may or may not work to the amount of accuracy that we were seeing earlier. And therefore there will be subjective underwriting, there will be larger calls that will be taken in terms of industries. And therefore I think the lending landscape is going to change a little bit, and people who have not taken moratorium and people who are part of industries which have not faced the brunt of COVID as much will have a lot of negotiating power over the coming few months.
So like you mentioned like various sectors, right? So I was just wondering how do you use tools to analyze it? Because right now we're in a state of flux, and like better than me, there are certain sectors, maybe in the short run it's risky to lend, but in the long run it may not be. It could also be vice versa. So I'm sure right now the data you're getting, how are you handling? What kind of tools? Because it's like before you could make a 5-year plan. Now it's like 3 months, this will happen, 6 months, this will happen. So how are you at the back end? How are you handling all this flux?
So I think it's a very interesting time right now. It's a tragic time, but I think from a ability to understand and then its implementation into the real world, it's a very interesting time. So as I said, we look at a lot of bank statement data and bureau data to create our models and to understand the credit worthiness of a customer. Now, bureau data has typically taken a hit because there is no payment coming through, there is no flow in the buckets, etc. So typically, bureau scores are not being able to differentiate or discriminate between customers and account. And I think that's where bank statements are a huge help. So we look at a year's bank statement, and therefore we are able to understand pre-COVID vis-a-vis within the COVID time, what is the change in the banking that we are seeing, right? Whether it be debits, whether it be credits, whether it be daily balances. You typically look at the last 3 months, you look at last 6 months, you look at last 12 months. You create multiple parameters, and then you combine it with hypotheses around industries, right? So there are multiple studies, multiple consulting firms who have given their views on how different industries are going to, get impacted by COVID. So you marry that hypothesis with what you are seeing into the bank statements, and then start deriving your own analysis out of, therefore, in the shorter run, which are the ones where I can take an exposure, which are the ones I need to have a wait and watch approach. It is an evolving situation, it is an evolving approach, but I think given that we already had the models in place, I think we are in a much better position to just evaluate that entire shift well and be able to then project it into how these businesses are going to do in the coming 6 to 9 years.
Okay. And then based on all of this, what do you would say is like the future of microfinance? Because I'm sure in tomorrow's world, everyone will have a smartphone, everyone will have, a digital identity. It'll be much easier for you to verify and all. So I'm sure, and even like technologies like blockchain are coming, cryptocurrencies. So if you can speak about the future of microfinance.
Sure. So I think mobile continues to grow. I think almost 60-70% of mobile penetration, and most of it is now smartphone, which allows for multiple captures. I think over and above that, technology is obviously starting to make an impact. I think let me address blockchain first, because that's the hot topic. Look, India is at a very interesting play right now. There is account aggregator which is coming in, which will essentially be about managing the customer's financial and non-financial data exposure to a particular lender or a financial institution, right? So today we are starting with mutual funds and insurance details and so on. Tomorrow it will be about utility bill payments, it will be about telecom bill payments, etc. So as I said, the third lens of credit underwriting, which is the habit to pay, will start becoming more and more prominent through these account aggregation models, where we'll start looking at, what is the habit to pay on utilities, what is the habit to pay on telephone bills and so on. So all of that will start to come together. And I think blockchain has a very important role to play in the account aggregator workspace, because, there needs to be security, privacy of data, a seamless flow through. All of that is where I think blockchain can start making a large amount of impact. So, earlier we were all scraping multiple websites to get to customers' data. I think with account aggregator, that whole piece is going to completely become, regulated and much more structured. And with blockchain, it will then become secure, and privacy will be maintained of user data and so on, right? So I think that's where I see blockchain becoming a huge player. On the mobile data, I think, look, whether it be customer authentication, so, it'll all be linked through the Aadhaar. Customer will be able to, do the KYC by putting in either a thumbprint or just putting up an OTP, and therefore a simple OTP will be able to authenticate the customer. You'll start looking at GPS positioning to ensure that, you are able to understand workspaces and home spaces of the customer. I think those two are the large plays from a mobile perspective that I see, which is more in the acquisition space, right? And similarly, SMS data, etc., continuing to add value. I think from a cross-sell, upsell perspective, location will become important, because you will have hyper-located location offers. You will also have spend patterns coming out of the customers' spends, transactions coming on the SMS. So I think a combination of those two can create the right set of offers for the customers. I think what will also end up happening is, app-based lending will increase a lot. So therefore, just open up a line of credit to the customer, and the customer keeps spending as and when is required, and all of that could be done through the app. So I think that's a large part that will happen. And again, on collections, I think the entire payments piece is going to be completely mobile.
So that was pretty informative. I'll probably ask one last question. From 1980s, we have been hearing paperless office, paperless, but the paper has been increasing. But I think that is changed, because in the olden days, you had a form and that would be digitized. But now the collection of data is digitized. I mean, whether it's like loans, whether it's insurance, whether it is identification papers, now the data collection is being handled by mobile agents. So I think we are reaching 100% digitization, cloud world. But I mean, one, is that possible? Is it happening? And second, what are the dangers of that from security and loss of data? So I'd like to...
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head, actually. Yeah. Look, I think 100% digitization will still take some time. Okay. But I think it's become very rapid digitization, because suddenly that paper that you used to work on is not available to you anymore. It's lying in your office. Right? So I think people have had to change their business models overnight, and that's starting to shape up most of the digital integration that's happening. That said, we still depend on a lot of paper. Whether it be public sector banks, looking still at paper files, etc. So I think, and given that they occupy a large share of the overall banking and financial services market,
Right.
I think it will take some time. But this particular pandemic has actually forced people to innovate and innovate very rapidly and depend on digitization. Right? So I think, and the customers also, I think, even I, for example, whenever I had applied for a loan earlier, I would have, taken my bank statement printouts, got it signed by the relationship manager, and then given it to the bank, right? Today, there is something like a Perfios which digitizes my bank statements directly. It also allows me to directly navigate through my net banking and give access to my data to the lenders. And with account aggregators coming in, that is going to become much more paperless. So I think digitization definitely has picked up speed big time, and this particular pandemic situation has come to the rescue of that. In terms of security, look, I think we are getting better on digital security. That said, there are challenges, right? I mean, even if you look at the world's top 3 bureaus, credit bureaus, they have all had, customer data leaks, and financial information has been leaked, social security numbers have been leaked. It's happened in the US, it's happened in India, it's everywhere, right? So I think there is going to be more and more emphasis on very, very secure communications. And I think that's where I said blockchain could actually play a part in the whole data aggregation space, where privacy, because everything is encrypted, nobody has access to data in flow. It is only, an end use based access to data. So data is available at the customer's end. The blockchain acts as a pipe. It's a completely, encrypted flow through of the data, which cannot be analyzed in motion, and then it directly reaches the end lender, right? So I think their blockchain coming through will support it quite a bit. And over and above that, I think there is going to be increasing scrutiny on whoever has this data access. They will be much more regulated. They will come under much more scrutiny. They'll have to, give reports out in terms of what measures are being taken to ensure there is no hack, etc. So I think there will be a lot of emphasis on data governance and data security over the coming times. And I think that's merited, given that, it is going to become a digital economy.
Okay. So thank you, Abhishek. Thank you so much for your time.